Good. Most of the IRGC was schooled either in the United States or in Britain, and they have a very in-depth profile of American culture. You have to grant them that, and the president does.
Yeah.
Second, most of the media, the entire Democratic Party, the entire British imperial empire is lined up for the president to fail, and they want you convinced that this is all a complete show brought on by Donald Trump's ill temperament, as opposed to what he's actually doing.
They want you to
And so
think
they
he's
have
some
all
kind of
sorts stuff like
incompetent
that. Iran is winning the war. Iran has basically
person.
done this, that, the other thing. So half of the day is spent in the White House actually confronting all the BS. But
Yeah.
that's what you're still getting across the board through the mainstream media and a whole lot of social media at this point, because the Iranians are
Yeah,
really
it's all
good at
over the
social
place.
media.
They're saying this
The
president's
Iranians
incompetent.
are terrific at propaganda.
So when people scratch their head and they say, why hasn't he bombed the crap out of everything in Iran?
Because he
Or,
has
why
a
hasn't he
heart?
done this? Why hasn't he done that? First of all, if people are looking at it from the standpoint of the issue is Iran, then they're not going to understand anything that Donald Trump is doing. Secondly, what he is trying to do is also create the conditions where there is something of this country left.
Exactly.
For all the peaceniks out there who get their panties in a
Yeah,
bunch
people
about
on
Donald
CNN.
Trump, the guy could have bombed them back to the Stone Age 2 months ago. He
Exactly.
clearly doesn't want to. Like he
Exactly.
didn't want to send in an invading army to Venezuela.
And for the
Trying to
people that are
create
going against
circumstances in a
them
much more
in
difficult
government,
situation than Venezuela, where something organic can emerge from within
this
that
is why
nation
we're
so that
taking
they
our
can actually
time.
govern themselves. And in order to do that, you actually still have to have some economy left.
Yeah, you don't want to go in there and just wipe out everything, even though we wiped out
Iranian
most of their
military has been
government
fatally, mortally crippled. Their
military,
defense
we should
industrial base
say.
has been mortally crippled.
Yeah, their military
Economy
is
is
gone.
crippled by the
Their
closure of the
government
strait
is gone.
and the fact that they have no place to store any more oil. And Scott Bessent is carrying out Operation Economic Fury, closing off billions and billions of dollars of flows, including crypto,
That's
that
gonna
the
hurt
IRGC has used.
the royal.
Think about the wars that we've been dragged into,
Yes, speak about the royals. Here we go.
of people who have died on our side among civilian populations in the Mideast. The horror of that over
Think
the
about
past
that.
several decades. And look at
This
what he
goes
is
back
doing
to
in terms
before
of trying to strategically
Reagan.
change what
Before
Iran
Reagan.
is without that devastation and death. Now, where a lot of the pressure comes from in terms of why isn't he bombing the crap out of them, is we're all sitting there saying, oh my God, we know the effect that this is having on the American people as we go into the midterm elections. I hope this gets
Are you
over
crazy?
soon. But you do
I
not want
hope
to
this
trade
is
that
over
off
soon.
against the fact that he is moving strategically to carry out a fundamental shift,
He's taking his time.
breaking 100 years of British imperial control. This is one of the last nodal points.
Have you noticed it? It was a
And yet
2-day
he's trying
war.
to
The
do it
war took 2 days.
destroying a nation and killing tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people.
That's what you
pretty
want?
amazing.
That's what you want.
And I think people need to take a breath and think about that. So, do we know things through discovery, which only happens in your mind? It's not a function of your senses.
Yeah, use your brain. And when you're on the Torosaurus Rex show, we like using our brain. Right, collective?
I see these two different things and I can't reconcile them. Oh, I wasn't thinking about it the right way.
Let's
In the
look at
simplest
it
terms, that's
from a
freedom.
different point of view.
Aristotle is you take in things through your senses, and like a computer, you rearrange them. But the question of human creativity is fundamentally not there. Now, there's a political
Yeah,
side
if
to
you
this
do it that way,
They were
that's
engaged
computer
in the same
literary,
political
then
battle
that's cold.
that we're engaged in today
That's very
on
cold.
opposite sides. It's fundamentally that question of
Machinery
the
is
image of man, and I
cold.
think the best way to capture it
Human,
is that beautiful
is
metaphor from
good
Plato's
for all, harm to none.
where after he takes you through a whole long discussion
Yeah,
How do you
because
train the
good
leaders
for all,
of the
hard
republic?
to none.
They
It's
explore
hard.
all
Very
sorts
hard.
of
We're at war now.
hypotheses in terms
And
of
we're
how
trying
to do
not
this,
to be at
including
war.
arranged marriages, and you're all sitting there saying, "What the F
yeah.
is he talking about?" At that point, Plato
Arranged
says,
marriages.
"Oops, we forgot
People
something.
in Iran
We
do
forgot the
marry
purpose of
children at
government.
9-year-olds.
The purpose of government is to discover the good
good in people.
the good which is embedded in the Creator's universe."
And there is
And then
good
he uses
in
this
people.
incredible metaphor,
We can get
which is the
good
metaphor
for
of
all,
the
harm
cave.
to none.
He describes this image of slaves who are chained to a bench facing the back of a cave. They can't
That's
turn
what
their
we're in
heads.
right now.
There's a
Right
light
now,
behind them,
that's
showing
us.
shadows on the
Looking
cave
at the wall.
All they've ever seen is the shadows.
That's us looking at that
They
wall.
think the shadows are real. The shadows
There's people
are what
like
your
us,
senses provide you all
Susan,
the time.
Barbara,
Shadows on the wall.
me,
And then what Plato says is the true philosophers
Almighty, if I could
are the
ever
ones who
find
can
him.
free themselves, go out and see that there's sunlight generating the light. He uses that from the standpoint of the mental image. You have to get out of the world in which
Think
you
outside
think
the
the
box.
shadows are real and figure out what generates them. That's science.
There you
That's real
go.
science.
Proof
This was
that
the
you
absurdity
can
of
do
COVID.
things
That's
better,
science
that
says.
you
No,
can
science
build
never
society,
says
that you
anything.
can
Science is a method
build
of
on what
discovery,
you know.
where the universe says,
Take
"Oops,
what you
no,
know
were
and
wrong.
prove
You
it.
go back to the drawing board and figure this out." And it forces you to discover something new and discover something new
About
and
yourself.
put that to
By
work.
going
In
within
terms of how you
and
organize
building
your
on what
society,
you know.
you can get that from
What's
Plato.
best
You
for
can get
you.
that from Aristotle.
Take the shadows on
Do
the
we
wall and
know
do what's
things
best for
through
you.
discovery?
The function of the gold reserve standard, and it was a gold reserve standard, not a gold standard. The gold
No,
standard
gold
was a
standard's
British
different.
standard in which they could capture the gold.
Yeah,
and
we'll
they'd be
take
screwed
your
if they
money
didn't have
and we'll figure it
The
out
gold
later.
reserve standard was totally
That's what they
different.
did with the
It was
gold.
idea
They convinced the
that
people
your
to take
money
paper
should
money.
be tied to
Paper.
production.
Look at the dollar.
And that it
Is
allowed
it a piece
for
of gold?
a system
Then
of
they gave you a
trading
piece of copper and said,
monetary
it's a penny.
currency
Here.
stabilization, which allowed
got the gold.
for production
They
to
gave you
actually
paper.
occur throughout the world by having very
Nobody
low
has gold.
interest loans
We got our gold.
dedicated
The
solely
government has
to
our gold.
production, not necessarily
We're figuring out how to
consumption, although
redistribute it to
obviously
the
food
people.
and other things are
Because
things
that
you
gold belongs to
consume
the people.
and are vital for life. But the idea was, how do you create a system where you can loan people money for a
Gold.
long
God's
period of
gold
time
belongs to
so
the
that they can
people.
actually develop something at an interest rate which allows you a reasonable profit, but doesn't result in this usurious system of credit, which is the British system.
That's
So
right.
I think
I
everything
want
we're doing
the
at this
gold to
point
go to the
in
people
terms of
again.
reinventing
Because
the
God's
productive economy
gold
is in that
belongs
direction.
to the people.
Whether it will be specifically a gold reserve
Not a
standard
piece of
or something
paper.
else,
Wipe
the
your
whole
ass with
idea
that
of
paper.
Besant and everybody
Toilet
else is
paper.
let's figure out a way to get credit, long-term credit, into production, into developing the world.
That's
And
where we're
I
at
think that's the
now. How do we
direction.
get
I don't know
the
whether
gold
or
back
not
to
it
the
will
people?
actually
How do
result
we
in a
build
new
society a
gold
new
reserve
way?
standard as the monetary anchor to actually do that.
If any of you watched these hearings,
They're gonna try and do this
with
hemisphere
cabinet members,
bullshit.
if you didn't suddenly get an image of the Salem witch trials, then you need to go back and read the Scarlet Letter or something. These people are hysterical. They are
They're saying
approaching
that
every cabinet member from the
everybody's
standpoint
against-
of
everybody's
"You're witches
against
and
what
we
he's
want to burn
doing."
you at the stake. But what is less seen, but is happening in a very profound way, is the extent to which pretty much every single relevant cabinet member
Right.
is singing the same song in
Yeah.
terms of what it is that the British Empire is terrified of. Why they really want to burn everybody at the stake.
Right.
Because
They
this
want you to look the other way.
is taking us back to the American system.
They don't want
We
that
saw
because it goes
beautiful
against the political
discussion of that when
point of view of
Scott
the
Bessent
imperial
spoke
law.
at the Reagan Economic Forum, but a very powerful powerful indictment of the principles of British imperialism.
We gotta bring
The
people to
indictment of
court.
the invisible
We gotta
line.
use
The indictment of the so-called rules-based order.
Yeah, we gotta go.
Making very clear that these are the
This gotta go
policies
to a
that gutted
judge.
our economic independence, and we are going back to the kinds of industrial policies,
That's right.
tariff policies, credit policies, which are going to unleash the productive power of this country.
That's
And
right.
Besant used a phrase in there which was very much channeling Alexander Hamilton's concept that the wealth of a nation is the productive power of labor. Pay attention.
You try to get us to sacrifice ourselves and follow the European Union into setting up windmills around the country that would have took us into a financial
These people are
disaster.
all stressing the fact that
You
industrial
sacrificed
policy,
Germany and thought we were gonna
is the
follow.
foundation
I
of
came on
everything
here,
that we do,
Torosaurus
whether it's
Rex
defense
came on
policy,
here
whether
and
it's foreign
exposed
policy.
things, told
You
America
have
not
to
to
be
do it.
economically sovereign with industry, agriculture, technology, all the
Somehow,
things
we
that a
slowed
sovereign
down.
nation needs to have. This is what they are hysterical about. You have not
They're
had
mad
a single
that
administration
America
on point in this way.
making the right
In at
decisions
least,
following
I
Trump.
would say 100 years.
But we gotta
if
open
not
up
going
our
back to
eyes,
William McKinley.
because
The
when he's
entire 20th
out of
century
here, we
has
gotta
been
be
shaped
set up.
by the British imperial system trying to
move
beat
forward.
this out of existence forever. And honestly, they thought they'd done it. And Donald Trump has come along and said, no, you haven't. We're back. This policy is back. This is the foundation of everything that we're doing. And the only basis upon which we are ever going to defeat empire once and forever.
Look at the appearances yesterday before the Crown Show hearings, which are occurring in each of the various committees about the budget. You'll see that right now, Trump already knows the game, that it's just set up. He doesn't care. He's going to try and actually get a huge mandate, just like you see in California, for his policies in the election. And that mandate, in turn, is going to shock these people into reality. Now, how did he respond to them saying, we're not going to pass the Save America Act. We don't like what you're doing. We don't like the way you're doing it. You're not following the rules. Cut it out. We're going to show you. How did he respond to that? Well, he said, okay, here's Bill Pulte. He's going to be the acting director.
We're gonna take the guy that you hate the most and we're gonna make him the boss.
Completely in a conniption fit. Why? Because Pulte is like a bull in a china shop.
Oh my God.
And my friend, the NSA veteran, Kirk Wiebe, once told me, I asked him the question, how would you go about reforming the deep state? What would you do? And he said, first, you need someone with a chainsaw, a weed whacker, who's willing to go in there and just tear
Fire
everything down.
everybody.
And then you need somebody from the intelligence community who actually knows how to direct the weed whacker to where he's got to go. So Tulsi Gabbard did that. In the
A new
first term.
Tony Blair.
Is
This Tony Blair
basically
guy is an
capable of
asshole.
doing that. He's got Tulsi Gabbard's chief assistant, Aaron Lucas, who was
They got all
deputy
Tony
DNI
Blair
for
enemies
Tulsi,
going.
to show him exactly where to go. And people like Mark Warner, the senator who was probably most responsible for Russiagate, is completely flipping out. He says, this guy's going to have access to every classified secret in the United
He's gonna
States.
set up
What does that mean?
your enemy with your enemy. So basically, the enemy of the enemy is my
Kept coming
friend.
back over and over again to the rigging of the 2020 elections. And my bet is the way he's seeing Pulte is this is the guy who can prevent the fraud coming up in the midterms by actually being completely on top of it and singularly focused on it. So that has Washington in an uproar. That's the dynamic, folks. Trump doesn't care anymore about the stupid Congress.
This is basically what's going on, so you can understand what you're seeing on CNN and Fox and all these channels.
In everything he's doing in Washington, he's rebuilt the place.
Yeah, he
He stopped
is.
the crime. He cleaned up the reflecting pool, which was a complete disaster.
You gotta admit,
Genuinely make it the
Gotta
capital of
admit it.
the Renaissance United States. Look at the appearances yesterday.
So not only did President Trump drop the F-bomb more than once in his call to Bibi, he also pulled rank. According to the Axios administration source, Trump told Netanyahu, "You're effing crazy. You'd be in prison if it weren't for me. I'm saving your ass. Everybody hates you, and everybody hates Israel because of this." So set aside that this makes the crowd that keeps telling you Trump is Netanyahu's puppet.
Exactly. I keep telling you he's
Look at
not.
what the leak actually shows. Do you think Donald Trump took a poll of his advisors before he made that phone call to Netanyahu?
Hell
He
no.
decided, and then he acted.
Yep.
That is the power of the American presidency. When it's
you
occupied by one
use it
individual
the
with
right
personal
way, that's the way
responsibility
you
to protect
have
his name
power.
and beyond, and then acts. And that is exactly what is not supposed to happen. Not in John Bolton's world, not in the world of the Anglo-American elite that spent 80 years building
Bowing to the crown.
president on a leash. So not only did President Trump drop the F-bomb, everyone has seen the Axios report of President Trump dropping F-bombs on Bibi Netanyahu and ordering him to stand down on Lebanon.
Yeah.
But here's what most of you haven't heard.
Okay.
John Bolton, 5 days earlier, complaining about how
Talk about
Donald
it.
Trump makes decisions. Bolton and his neocon friends think that that's a bad thing.
Right.
Trump making decisions without the national security process. And the media says that the Iran negotiations are failing and Trump is just lashing out.
Yeah,
But
I
here's what
heard
they're
that
hiding.
too.
Trump has redefined how a president acts and the principles upon which he acts. And they are not imperial
Taking
principles.
it back to the days of
What
The
they call failure
Apprentice.
is a president reasserting the power of the presidency for the United States, and the empire is not happy.
Yep,
I'm Susan
fired.
Kokimba. I was on the ground in Washington in the 1970s and the 1980s, and I watched the slow subjugation of the American presidency to the British Empire.
See?
I watched the apparatus that manages American presidents get assembled.
Hypnotize the
So
whole
if you want to
world.
see exactly how Donald Trump is disassembling it,
He's
like,
waking
share,
everybody
and
up.
subscribe
He's
to
showing the
Stay in
kids
Touch
there's a
and
new
build our
way.
audience.
Now, what else are Blair and Ellison building?
All right, here we go.
it's a
Tony
surveillance
Blair.
state. Larry Ellison is a surveillance and censorship freak, and that's the other major project he and Tony Blair have created. Ellison's remarks on the subject parallel those of the founder of modern British intelligence, Jeremy Bentham. Designed a prison he called the Panopticon, where the inmates were surveilled on all sides. The prisoners behaved because they thought the guards were always watching.
Oh, shit.
Ellison says the same thing about his plans, and I
He
quote,
wants to set that up in
"Citizens will be on
America.
their best behavior because we're constantly
They did
recording
that in
and
Europe.
reporting everything that's going on."
Yeah,
Digital
Europe is
ID, which was
collapsing.
never in Labor's manifesto, was installed through
Check
Blair's
out
protégés
England.
Kyle and Streeton, and the
They wanna
enforcement
make
layer
that
is
here.
already running. In 2023, British police made 12,183 arrests under communication laws, more than 30 people a day. J.D. Vance called it out at Munich in February 2025, but that's exactly the population control system that almost got fully implemented here under Joe Biden.
Exactly, and
All
they
the
want to bring
over-the-top
that back.
violence and rhetoric by the far-left progressives and paid insurrectionists isn't necessarily to get votes. It alienates broad swaths of voters. It's meant to create an opening for what Blair calls the radical centrists in either party. Both will be equally effective in stymieing the president's revolutionary agenda and continuing the destructive chapter in our history which occurred under Joe Biden, which they all went along with. In Texas, Ken Paxton just beat $90 million of Senate establishment money by sticking with President Trump's agenda. And the voters of Louisiana just sent the same message about Bill Cassidy. Those votes
Yeah,
show
but
you
that's
exactly
not in
how
the
to
paper.
destroy
It's nowhere.
this subversion. Now, what else are Blair? Let's start with a number, $35 million. That is what Larry Ellison, founder of Oracle, poured into making Tim Scott the President of the United States in 2024. Tim Scott called Larry Ellison his mentor. He said so publicly at his campaign launch. Tim Scott lost to Donald Trump. Who else did Ellison heavily fund? $1 million to Lindsey Graham this March alone. Graham chairs the Budget Committee, sits on Appropriations and Judiciary.
Graham's insatiable warmongering is just one aspect of this relationship.
Shit.
And Oracle gave $15,000 directly to the National Republican Senatorial Committee, plus $50,000 more from Ellison. The NRSC is the Senate's campaign machinery. Ellison protege Tim Scott chairs it and runs it. That's who just blew an estimated $90 million trying to defeat Ken Paxton and protect the rhino John Cornyn in Texas. Which gets us to John Thune. When Thune won a seat in 2005, he became Mitch McConnell's protege, climbing every rung of McConnell's ladder for 15 years until January 2025, when he took McConnell's seat as Senate Majority Leader. He beat the other McConnell protege, Senator John Cornyn from Texas. McConnell, an instrument of the Bush family, hates this president, and McConnell's proteges have acted on that hatred. Thune voted to certify the 2020 election. He has publicly disagreed with the president on nationalizing elections. And in 2024, he endorsed, guess who? Tim Scott. Ideologically, the Bush crowd in the Senate is dedicated to the post-war globalist order, which Donald Trump is destroying. That's why they gave billions to Ukraine in a blank check for Russia, and they still try to block Trump's push for peace there. The radical centrists in either party will be equally effective in stymieing the president's revolutionary agenda and continuing the destructive chapter in our history which occurred under Joe Biden, which they all went along with. Just look at the United States Senate and what they did during that disaster.
And the Ukraine's president,
Paxton just beat $90 million of Senate establishment money by sticking with President Trump's agenda. And the voters of Louisiana just sent the same message about Bill Cassidy. Those votes show you exactly how to destroy this subversion. You shock the Senate into changing, or you vote them out, with margins so overwhelming they can't be explained away, can't be spun.
Come on, America, get on track.
That is the message that has to be sent in the midterms.
Get on track.
It can't be a whisper. It must be a thunderclap. Let's start with why is the U.S. Senate constantly blocking Donald Trump's agenda, starting with the Save America Act. The media will give you all sorts of answers, starting with the fact that the Republican majority in the Senate is razor thin. But that's not the real story. To begin, you have to look at the real influences on the U.S. Senate. Today, we're going to look at a very significant donor, Larry Ellison. He also happens to be the major funder of former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair. We're going to show you how Blair and Ellison plotted to start a forever war with Iran, which would trap Donald Trump and destroy his presidency. The war so far has been a disaster for Blair and his sponsors in the city of London. That's why Blair is frantically trying to reinvent himself and rescue Democrats here by a comeback tour. I'm Barbara Boyd, and I've watched the U.S. Senate sabotage this president for 10 years. Today, we'll profile John Thune and the Senate Republican Campaign Committee, where Larry Ellison is a hugely significant donor. Then we'll look at the Tony Blair Institute, where Tony Blair and Larry Ellison planned a regime change war in Iran. If you think Israel was the cause of this war, you're missing the real picture. Why is the U.S. Senate constantly blocking Donald Trump's agenda, starting with the Save America Act? The media will give you all sorts of answers, starting with the fact that the Republican majority in the Senate is razor thin.